In 1905, the streets of Bengal surged with anti-colonial mobilization. Hundreds of thousands of citizens took to the streets in coordinated, massive resistance. The British government had just announced the partition of Bengal, splitting the province along religious lines. In response, Indian leaders launched the Swadeshi movement, an economic and political boycott of British goods, triggering mass gatherings like this one in Dhaka. The prevailing political narratives of the time demanded absolute devotion to the cause. Leaders glorified collective passion, unquestioning patriotism, and the willingness of the individual to sacrifice everything for the nation. Rabindranath Tagore watched this rising political fervor and recognized a distinct, growing danger. In his 1916 novel, The Home and the World, he wrote a rigorous critique of this ideological absolutism, warning that political passion detached from morality leads directly to fanaticism. Tagore dismantles the logic of blind patriotism by staging a psychological conflict between three characters. By analyzing how this conflict is constructed in his novel, and later translated in Satyajit Ray's film adaptation, we see why true liberation requires ethical self-awareness alongside political action. To understand the complex realities of colonial India, we have to look past the physical protests in the streets and examine the internal psychological battleground where ideology takes root. Tagore's spatial paradox divides the home and the world, separated by a single threshold. The home provides security, but enforces rigid patriarchal control. Conversely, the world is the volatile public arena where aggressive ideological struggle and modern political participation take place. In Tagore's framework, crossing this physical boundary represents a profound ethical shift. Stepping from the home into the world serves as the ultimate moral test for the individual. Tagore structures the ideological conflict as a triangle. The first node is nickel, embodying ethical humanism, insisting patriotism must never violate universal morality. The second is Sandeep, representing charismatic nationalism, who believes political expediency justifies violence. Sandeep's ideology manifests in reality through manipulating collective pride and deliberately excluding dissidents. During the Swadeshi movement, political leaders frequently relied on public shaming and coercion to force villagers into compliance. Caught directly on the threshold line is Bimala. She is the psychological battleground where Nickel's universal morality and Sandeep's aggressive political vision clash. Tagore maps the macro-political fate of colonial India entirely through the micro-politics of female subjectivity and domestic tension. Bimala seeks public recognition. Her attraction to the cause stems from a desire for intellectual agency. She is drawn to the political movement because she wants to participate in public life. Conventional early 20th century nationalist narratives frequently reduced women to flat, idealized symbols of the motherland. Tagore rejects this convention, granting Bimala an independent interior consciousness filled with ambition and contradiction. When Bimala finally steps over the threshold and enters the political arena, she experiences the immediate sensation of emancipation. Yet this physical movement creates an illusion. Bimala falls into a threshold trap. She finds herself exchanging the ideological control of patriarchal domesticity for Sandeep's manipulative political rhetoric. True agency requires internal moral accountability. Reconfiguring one's physical location is useless if the underlying ideological control remains intact. How does a writer physically structure a novel to prove that ideological truth is subjective? Tagore achieves this through Bhakti-Enian polyphony. Using multi-perspective first-person narration, Nikhil, Sandeep, and Bimala each narrate independently, represented by distinct waveforms. Eliminating an omniscient narrator provides no absolute truth, forcing readers to interpret clashing internal monologues. This structural choice exposes the glaring contradictions between public political rhetoric and private selfish desires. We hear Sandeep's passionate speeches, but we also read his opportunistic internal thoughts. Tagore's use of psychological realism serves as a literary safeguard against demagoguery, proving that ideology must always be vetted against inner conscience. When director Satyajit Ray adapted the novel in 1984, he faced a problem: how to translate internal, overlapping monologues into a visual, spatial medium. As shown in these wireframes, Ray solves this using spatial mise-en-scène. He externalizes the internal philosophical tensions through blocking, framing, and lighting, mapping the characters' mindsets directly onto the physical environment. Ray translates Nikhil's ethical humanism without relying on introspective text. Instead, he uses highly restrained acting, calm dialogue pacing, and a dignified physical presence within the frame to project moral integrity. By contrast, Ray visually amplifies Sandeep's charisma. Through dramatic sound design, commanding physical positioning, and expressive lighting, Sandeep's political magnetism becomes visually overpowering. Bamala's moral transformation is communicated almost entirely without words. Ray relies on silence, micro-expressions, and her physical movement across cinematic thresholds to show her internal evolution. While cinema lacks the direct interior monologue of a novel, it compensates by making the catastrophic gravity of ideological extremism viscerally and spatially immediate. The narrative reaches a climax of devastating self-recognition, stripping away any hope of a triumphant, easy emancipation. Returning to our architectural map, we see that as her node moves into the world space, it structurally transforms. Her realization of Sandeep's narcissism forces a painful internal reckoning. Through this clarity, she emerges as a fully realized ethical subject. Tagore leaves the reader with a stark warning. Noble political goals never legitimize immoral methods. Leaders who exploit public emotion for personal power are inherently destructive, regardless of the cause they claim to champion. Tagore's critique of the charismatic demagogue addresses the same psychological triggers leveraged in political rhetoric today. By analyzing Sandeep's manipulation of passion over reason, we find a consistent pattern in how extremist ideologies capture a public. Literature and cinema act as complementary epistemologies. Reading cultivates analytical reflection. Cinema grounds those concepts in human empathy. Together, they provide a rigorous method for navigating the threshold of the modern world.